Hey, what's going on everyone? In this review, we'll be looking at one of the more interesting Zeon suits, the MS-18E Kämpfer. As always, I'll be reviewing this Master Grade model kit in 4 categories: the build, appearance, articulation, and gimmicks. I'll be giving each a score from 1 to 5, so at the end I can tally it all up for an average score. Hopefully I can help you decide if you should pick up this model kit. Okay, now let's get started with this build. First off, this kit came out way back in January of 2001, so naturally it's dated as hell. Having said that, the early 2000s did have the Master Grade gun cannon and ground Gundam kits, both of which are just fantastic, so we can't just write this build off. Actually, this kit has a pretty decent bare bones inner frame in the legs and arms. Given its age, the engineering of this frame can be a little out there. The knees specifically are really strange, being a very thin piece of ABS plastic held together with 2 screws. Then there's some armor haphazardly snapped around it to at least make it look sturdy. The screws, by the way, are just terrible. Really, they just don't fit at all. It sounds like I'm tearing apart this inner frame, but really it's pretty good for its time period. I mean, it comes with braided pipes for the chest, and the ABS plastic actually has a slight metallic shine to it, which is pretty cool. Moving on to the armor, there are some bad seam lines and even worse nubs. Literally every piece on this kit has at least one bad nub. On top of that, the nubs are really thick, so no matter how much effort you put into it, there's still going to be some discoloration. Something tells me if this kit came out today, it'd be entirely undergated. Like the Riga Z I just reviewed, this kit features yellow inserts for the vents, which is a major positive. Since this kit is mainly blue and gray, the yellow goes a long way in defining this suit, even more so than it did with the Riga Z. There are even some details inside of these vents that someone more professional could get looking really good, but my hands are nowhere near steady enough for that, so aside from this prominent leg vent, I just filled them all with black paint. Honestly, I kinda prefer this more simplified look, but that's just me. Speaking of the painting, there are some other places where you'll want to break out those Gundam markers. First up is that pink mono eye. It comes as an individual clear piece, and there is no provided sticker, so paint is your only option here. Next is this white section on the horn. You do get a sticker for it, but it pops up all the time, so you're much better off with paint. This white section around the shoulder spike is also a sticker. Lastly, there are some small dots around this kit that really benefit from some black paint, mainly these on the shoulder and these on the front of the arm. Painting just looks way more consistent than panel lining pins. In general, this build wasn't that great, but for its time it's pretty decent. The yellow inserts go a long way here, even more than they did with the Riga Z since they're so prominent on this blue. However, they're offset by poor nubs and seam lines. I think I'll break even between the good and the bad and give this build an average score of 3 out of 5. All in all, I say a beginner could build this kit if they want, but it would really take someone with experience to get him looking really good. Now let's take a look over his appearance. The first thing that hits me are the colors. Well, mainly the color, singular. This blue is just all-encompassing and drowns everything else out. That wouldn't be a bad thing, but unfortunately it's entirely the wrong shade. There's just too much green mixed in, especially if you compare it to the line art. Hell, even compared to the box art and the sample build, this blue is just off. Having said that, the yellow for the vents is pretty solid, and I really like the light gray of the shoulders and feet. Some of the inner frame also has a metallic shine to it, so really all the colors on this kit are great except for the blue. The proportions, however, are just amazing. The wonky proportions of these old school Master Grades do wonders for bulky kits. Really, this kit looks just as fat as he should be. Something tells me since the proportions are so great, all you'd have to do is repaint this blue and you'd have a pretty great looking build. The panel lines are also pretty great here, with nothing that wasn't in the original anime. Instead, however, you have a bunch of nubs muddying up the design. I mean, they really are just everywhere. I guess that's another point in favor of repainting all of this blue. The decals are pretty solid on this kit. The usual peel and stick caution signs are about what you'd expect, but the dry transfers are just great. You get a ton of extra Zeon decals. If you're into Zeon kits, this would definitely be a great way to get some extra decals. Something tells me if you spent a few hours really sanding down these nubs, then you applied a really nice glossy blue, you could have an amazing looking kit. But as it stands out of the box, he's only about average. I can nudge it up a little bit for the great decals, but that's really about it. I'll give this out of the box appearance a 3.5 out of 5. Really, of all the issues for the appearance to have, the colors are probably the easiest to fix, so don't let this be a deal breaker for you. Now let's see if he can pull off any cool poses. Starting at the feet, you get nothing aside from this toe movement. It's kind of a pointless feature, but considering the rest of the foot is just a brick, it's something at least. The ankles are a single ball joint, so you would get some decent movement, but it's hampered by the size of the foot and the ankle armor. The knees are pretty poor. Despite having 2 hinges, you're lucky to get a 90-degree bend here. It's really this back thruster that gets in the way. Oh, and don't forget how fragile the knees are because of that awkward inner frame. I mean, I feel like these things are going to snap at any second. These thrusters on the back do pull out, but honestly I'd rather them be able to push in for the knee articulation, but whatever. The hips are the old school ball and socket, so you get the usual limited splits and spins. Because there aren't any front skirts though, you can actually get some really amazing kicks. But remember, you can't really bend the knee, so there isn't much of a benefit here. The chest is just weird, being a hinge connected to a polycap with a ball joint underneath. But all said and done, you really don't get any movement here aside from a little bit of spinning movement. The arms are similar to the Master Grade Ground Gundam, in that they're a ball joint and a polycap. They also have some decent lateral movement, which is nice. The arms have a solid 360 spin on the top, and about a 135-degree bend from the 2 elbow joints. The wrists are on the usual ball joints. You only get 2 sets of hands for this kit, the standard trigger finger split style, and a set of more stylized open hands. Lastly, the head is on a polycap and a ball joint, so you get some okay spins, but not a whole lot else. The neck is on a hinge though, so he would be able to look up pretty well if it wasn't for how long this head is. Really, this articulation is pretty horrible. I mean, a lot of older kits have poor articulation, but you can usually get more than a single pose. I mean, this knee bend and the chest movement is just next level bad. I really have to give the articulation a low 2 out of 5. You're pretty much limited to a standing pose and a hunched over shooting pose. Lastly, let's take a look at these gimmicks. Like in the anime, this kit is fully loaded, coming with a ton of weapons. Let's start with these 2 shotguns. They're a little on the bland side, being all gray, but they're detailed enough for some paint. Each one comes with a stabilizer, which is cool. Unfortunately, the stabilizer kinda gets in the way of him holding the gun straight. Of course, because of how the handle is angled, you can't really hold the gun straight anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. Next are his 2 bazookas. They're actually easier to hold than the gun because the handle is smaller and movable. You can actually get the barrel over his shoulder without too much headache, but again, they're all gray, so you're gonna need some black lining at the very least. As usual, he comes with 2 beam sabers. They have a really nice yellowish green color to them that really stands out compared to this blue base color. He also comes with 2 grenade-looking weapons called the Sturmfaust, or at least I think that's how they're pronounced. Anyway, you can choose between using the handle or these fins, which is pretty nice. They're technically supposed to be green, at least if you're going off the anime, but sometimes they're depicted as red. Either way, you're gonna have to break out the paint if you want them to look good. Lastly, he comes with his iconic chain mine. This thing is just great. There's actually a metal wire inside, so it can maintain some basic poses. Of course, it's so long that you're not going to get any straight out poses, but still, you can do a lot with it. The build can be a little tricky though, because you have to get the length of these 2 wires right, but it's nothing too bad as long as you pay attention. I will note that these circles are often depicted as yellow, so it may be worth looking into paint. I'm probably going to get on that right after this review. And that's it for the arsenal. It's pretty much everything you could ask for from my Kämpfer kit. Of course, he only has 2 hands, so he can't hold all of this stuff at once, which is where the coolest gimmick of this kit comes in. You can actually store all these weapons on the actual suit. Really, both bazookas on the backpack, the beam sabers in the hips, a shotgun on the waist, and the Sturmfaust on the legs. This leaves one hand open for the chain mine, and the other for the second shotgun. Man, he just looks so cool when he's all loaded up. It almost offsets how monotone these colors are. All these add-ons are pretty simple to get rigged up too. You just snap these connecting pieces around the weapons, then pop them into a polycap. They also don't hurt the articulation too much, since there really wasn't that much articulation to begin with. So really, there's no reason not to have this guy loaded up all the time. All in all, this kit's gimmicks are its main selling feature. You just get so many of them, and being able to store them all in the suit is amazing. They can look a little on the bland side being all gray, but still I have to give the gimmicks a near perfect score of 4.5 out of 5. I really don't think I'll ever display this kit without his weapons on. Alright, now let's wrap this up for an average score. The build was a 3 out of 5. The inner frame has some weird engineering and the armor is just covered with nubs, but it's nothing too bad as long as you're used to old school kits. The appearance was a 3.5 out of 5. The blue is just so off, but everything else is pretty great. The articulation was a 2 out of 5. You don't get any cool poses here. Even for an old school kit, this is pretty bad. And the gimmicks received a 4.5 out of 5. He comes with everything you could ask for, and being able to store everything on the suit is just great. Tallying all that up, dividing, and of course rounding to a single decimal point, this kit receives a 3.3 out of 5. But more accurately, it receives a 65%. While that is a pretty low score in terms of my reviews, I wouldn't say this is a big letdown. I mean, it's about what you'd expect from an old school bulky kit. The build isn't anything great and the articulation just sucks, but I'm sure if you put some work into it, you can make something that looks really great. All the gimmicks are a really nice touch too. Alright, thanks for watching, and feel free to leave any questions you have about this kit in the comments, and I'm more than happy to get back to you. You can also recommend more kits for me to review, and I'll see what I can do. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.